In this section, we wanted to wrap up with some co-seating tips. So I'm going to just jump right in. We're going to start kind of with a big idea, which is revisiting the scheduling of the minutes. So if you think about the term, planning from bell to bell, I think that's important anyway, but it's super important in this setting. So we're going to look at what we came out with earlier in the fall, about a 90-minute schedule for face-to-face or virtual, planning all the minutes all the way through. And just at first glance, what you can tell is it follows that responsive teaching model, our literacy model for the district, that is a quick teach, directly teaching, and then a lot of time spent practicing and doing. So a lot of reading, a lot of writing. Whoops, and go back. On this one, though, I wanted to just show you on each of these, this is in the format of architecture of a workshop. So this is that daily plan. So for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, this is something that you're familiar with and you're growing in high school. If you're seeing this might be new to you. But think of your a lesson cycle, and this really does break down what it looks like from the get-go about this connection to the mini lesson, to the engagement, then releasing, to the next piece, which is the independent reading. And then that's where the teacher is actively monitoring and then meeting with kids. So it's laid out in yellow, a step-by-step and kind of guide for what's going on during that time. And we also follow kind of, that's the know, and then the show and the how is labeled. On the right-hand side here is that language you might use, question stems you might use, and then also ideas that you might want to consider in the virtual setting are highlighted in aqua. And then in both the reading and the writing, I've linked a Penny Kittle resource because she just has great things for setting up workshop. So this is book love, and in the writing side, you will see the right beside them linked. I'm not going to go over there, but you get the idea. So in this setting, again, the chunk of the time, you want to build your students up to 30 to 40 minutes of reading and 20 to 30 minutes of writing. So you're like, oh, wow, okay. So how do we do that even in a co-seating situation? Well, I'm going to get into that right after I give you a few more tips. This is very similar to what I just showed you as far as it's looking at the breakdown of a lesson cycle, but this is what the I-team created in a document that I just moved into slides. And they did a great job of just doing a warm up and direct teach and moving into the traditional lesson cycle. And we just inserted the language of workshops. So instead of warm up, even though we have that right here, it's really in this co-seating situation, this is where you greet, like you're standing at the door greeting typically, and you're setting the stage for learning. So the routines are in place. So you'll notice there's things to consider and things about when to turn your the screen to freeze it or when to turn your camera off. All those little hints are in here, and we embedded those from the I-team. And then we've added some think aheads as well. And in this one in particular, we added lots of ideas of those quick 1, 2, 3 minute things that kids could do in that this moment of launching your class while the virtual kids are joining in, and everybody does them. And of course, a reader's and writer's notebook might be the space where they are doing that actual warm up, or it's linked as an assignment in the Google Classroom. The next phase, and I'm going to remember now to present, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want to point out a few co-seating tips in it. This is still the model. We're now moving directly into the mini lesson. And this is because the read aloud was done at the beginning of the unit, which is really that anchor text for the unit that you revisit. So in the mini lesson, knowing when your camera's on and off and sharing your screen, I think is great. I wanted to share this idea that came from Melissa Flynn at North Junior High. I loved it, that the mentor text that you're using for the mini lesson that you're going to be modeling from, actually making that or taking a picture, scanning, snagging, and then changing your slide size to an 8.5 by 11 and posting that in there. It's bigger, the kids can see it better, and now that's your background, so you can actually write on, and you can even use post-its to the side. So I thought that was an awesome little quick tip for the co-seating situation. You also have to think about how you're going to be annotating or doing your notes. And then you do need to think about plan partners, because not during the mini lesson typically, but towards the end, sometimes in the middle, you'll do a quick interaction with partners, and you need to make sure you have those established, but I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. Continuing independent reading. This is, again, where the students are busy and you are monitoring. They will end their day with a demonstration of learning. These are things to consider, though. I think they're very practical. You are going to need to keep your Zoom posted big for everyone, but you're also going to need to monitor where you can see your virtual kids, or have a Google Meet for your small group. And then you might need a space for you just to be able to access information without interrupting either of those. So whether you do a split screen, you just need to not be able to not interrupt the Zoom information, or not interrupt your kids where you're interacting with them, the virtual ones. Some possibly an iPad or another screen that for attendance, for example, or checking an email, that might be beneficial. So that's an idea. There's some other ideas built in here. And then continuing independent reading and writing, just some sample activities that are going on for students during the reading and during the writing, just to kind of remind you of what's happening again while you are monitoring the learning, this is really your slide for that. You're conferring, small grouping, sometimes a mid-workshop teaching point. But again, you have to know in small groups, obviously you've done this ahead. So how are you assigning them into the breakout rooms using a naming convention or G Suite? Or do they have a schedule where they just know when to join? Those types of things you need to think of and get routines established. And then I would make little videos of them, post them for FAQs on routines so that you don't have to keep repeating yourself. And then where their book, they have to have their books they're reading, and they have to have a notebook. So I suggest digital for both during the co-seat as far as their notebooks. And I like what Highlands Junior High suggested. They make their digital notebooks by week because it helped their kids stay focused and not have just a running slideshow of a digital notebook. So that's a great idea, and it can be hooked to your classroom, Google Classroom. And then you also can have partners that have a slideshow for the weeks that they're together. And again, I'm about to get to that piece. Actually, I think I skipped the piece. Or it comes up. Your partners are 3 to 5 weeks where they're together, and you could have them have a shared slideshow because that's where they can link audios or link videos or type their responses and actually interact on what they're learning and share. And the share at the end of the day is super important. And I just want to bring it up at the end because we tend to skip it. But this is where kids have buy-in. This is where they see themselves as readers and writers improving their craft. And it's their opportunity to reflect on the application of the mini lesson and their mastery of those essential standards and debrief on how they think they're doing with their partner. So what does that look like? Do you need to have breakouts or spaces for actual verbal interaction? Is it written? Is it recorded? That would dictate the tool, and there's some ideas in there. So moving back to our big slideshow, those are just some tips that were built in there. So now moving past that, here's kind of zooming in directly into the independent section. How do you manage that while you're trying to build those minutes, that stamina up? Well, I think we need to leverage those tools that we have. So 6 through 8 in Literacy Essentials at the high school has MemBean, and then all of our K-10 have IXL. And then 9 through 12, you actually have turnitin.com. That's something that you might be able to utilize. But here's the idea. While you're learning to manage it in the space and while they're building stamina, I would do a gradual release of a small group of doing a station of MemBean 3 times a week and IXL once and maybe longer reading a day, those types of things. But you might be, here's some situations, maybe two groups. This is a 3 group. This could be 3 or 4. What would it look like? Here's a sample in a A day, B day scenario. This was 3 groups. I did 2 face-to-face and 1 virtual. I did not mix my groups, but that is always an option, and I will mention that in a minute. But the idea here, I was just launching one tech tool at a time almost. MemBean is a good teaching program, not just skill practice. So it really can teach word consciousness. So I wanted them to get to use that first, and then maybe add in my IXL. No more than 15 minutes on either program per day, and MemBean says no more than 3 days a week. So just keep that in mind. But I would do that as a segue into reading, writing sometimes, or maybe as a station, and then gradually release it as a segue. And then eventually that's great work at home or after school because it's short but focused. And don't forget with IXL, you can assign the units essential standards that they're practicing, or you can have them working on skills they need to develop better based on the diagnostic. This is just a bonus slide. This chart is from this blog from Heinemann. And so I wanted it in there for you. It's great. There's some great ideas in there about writing workshop that can thrive in the pandemic. And I like looking at what to consider in a digital synchronous, asynchronous, and looking through the components of workshop, just another view. I want to end with the intentionality that we really need to have in building community, which is always important in language arts, but even more important when you have a co-seated group. And I think it's really great, really important to recognize that your virtual kiddos, whether it's all virtual or virtual in a co-seat, they need to kind of get their own connections and vibe and gel together. So one way you can do that is just kind of having things that are only for them. So that was an example Melissa Flynn shared with us, just a fluke that happened, the way the kid typed something in the chat, it was misspelled and it made it funny. And so now it's an inside joke. Well, it really, really brought them together as a virtual community. And the face-to-face kids don't know what they're talking about. And that was important. I think that's important to do those kinds of things. So look for ways to do that for the virtual kiddos. And then look at ways that you can now mix up your face-to-face and virtual. So now if I did that chart again, I might mix them. I might have some of my face-to-face, some of my virtual on MemBean, while some are independently reading and while some are meeting with me. So you can mix that up, and I think that's awesome to do for groups, for partners. I think that's great. This 3 to 5 weeks, they can maybe have a partner that's not in the class. And then when you move into something like book clubs, this is great because they're choosing the book on interest, and doesn't matter where they're getting the learning in the classroom, whether it's in the class or at home. So those are ways to really build community, as well as always asking for the students' input. And then I mentioned this earlier, really capturing the routines in the virtual setting in short little videos that you post in a hub space where kids know where they are, because you want to build agency in them and you don't want to repeat yourself a zillion million times and waste time. And it's great for new kids. Okay, guys, I hope you have a great day. I didn't want to take too long. I wanted to build on what you already learned. I wanted you to really see the connection of the planning, and then now back to day-to-day with co-seating tips. We really would love to hear from you. So remember, you have a tribe of support. You have AFs and campus lights and ICs and digital coaches and us and iTeam and ESL SPED teachers. So we are here to help and support. Here's our contact information. And please remember to do your district-wide day ELAR reflection so we can hear more what's worked for you today and areas where you still need support, or even ideas that you think would be great to share out with others, because everybody's learning still in this environment. We so appreciate you. Have a great day.